Thank you so much for tuning into Community Bread. For those that aren't aware, we are a queer-run live stream and resource platform connecting audiences around the world with marginalized artists to make it more easy to receive donations, as well as providing resources on how to support action and donate to Black Lives Matter and access government grants during this global pandemic. So this is where I'm very excited and honored to have our first guest open the launch, which is an old friend of mine that I've known for quite a while, but haven't talked to in probably a few years, Andrew Thomas Huang. And you may be familiar with him with his work as a filmmaker on working with Bjork, Thom Yorke, and one of my favorite music videos of all time, Cellophane by Twigs, Tiger Girl, and also his involvement with Eternal Dragonz, which is one of Community Bread's collectives. So thank you so much for joining us, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
So I guess first off, how has the past few months been for you?
It's been a powerful time, to say the least. You know, when lockdown first hit Los Angeles, it was pretty hard. March, April, and May were the hardest. You know, but at the same time, I say that it's so relative, right? I mean, I've been overwhelmed by the stories I've heard of friends who are just in they're just in difficult situations. It's a difficult time. And, but, you know, at the same time, it's been like a powerful time. There's a lot of love being passed around and a lot of like mutual support from other queer friends. And so, you know, it's been a time to reflect and a time to galvanize and mobilize and change the world as well. So I'm grateful for that.
Definitely. I mean, I've been in Australia for the past few months, and even being so isolated on the other side of the world, I've also felt that same energy as well. Obviously, yeah. You know, there's a lot of darkness going on, but seeing even how Pride came about this year, and it wasn't, you know, about floats or corporate branding. It was about kind of, you know, it was about marching and standing solidarity with our Black Indigenous people, you know, family. So it's really, for me, it's, you know, it really is a tough self-reflection as well. I mean, how do you think this will impact your work moving forward?
You know, I think there's no time to waste, given everything that has been going. Like, I guess I want to backtrack and say that this time is overdue. Mm-hmm. Like, this should have all happened sooner, and we needed Mother Nature to send us a virus and pause everything. And, you know, the time is now. There's no time to waste in the kind of, we have a lot of work to do. And I think I just have more conviction than ever to make work that resonates, that shifts the needle, moves the needle, and empower other voices also to make that work. So I just feel like, in a way, I felt like, you know, I was doing my thing before, but now I think I just feel even more determined and more focused and more educated, right? Because we've all been doing a lot of learning real time as well.
That makes complete sense. And I guess, you know, as someone whose work, you know, you as a queer kind of Asian artist in America, I mean, I was always very inspired by the work that you did because, you know, growing up in Australia, there wasn't really very many references or visual cues that I pulled from. You know, it was all a lot of it was from a lot of white references or white kind of language. So I'm just kind of curious. You know, because you've created these amazing worlds, you know, working with Bjork and FK Twigs, and I'm not saying that a lot of it is Asian centric, but I'm just curious to see where you pulled these cues from to develop your language.
It's kind of funny because so much of, I feel like this, I don't know. I feel like it's hard to look at maybe my own shift in thinking without talking about the global climate shift in our culture over the past 7 years, right? Like, I feel like 7, that's an arbitrary number. 10 years? I don't know. You know, like, I feel like I'm definitely, you know, a millennial. But I just feel like, you know, we are the children of a generation who all like migrated and dispersed around the world through the last century through war, famine, political upheaval. And so we're now all of age to make work that is like reflective of where we came from. And I don't think I felt safe to even go there until the past, again, 5 years. So I feel like, and it frankly was like seeing, you know, more Black and Indigenous voices speaking out and making work. It was through witnessing that, that work that was like, oh, like I have a lot that I've been afraid to examine and inject into my work that comes from my own cultural or familial autobiography. And I think working with artists like Bjork or Twigs or Thom, like they're all real artists in the sense that they really dive deep in the work they're making and the themes they're exploring, the same way any rigorous, you know, fine artist would. And a lot of it is very personal. And so, you know, it was a good education to work with them because it begs the question for me of like, why don't I do that for myself? So it's been a process of learning to get even more and more comfortable in sitting with my family's personal story, the strangeness of being, you know, I'm second generation Chinese American, so I'm even more removed from, you know, the generation that initially came here, but at the same time, you know, like there's still so much to talk about. There's still so much to mine. There's so many weird, just like questions that plague us of where we came from. Why do we still feel like we're not welcome? Why do we still? Why do I feel this kind of intergenerational discomfort and trauma that has trickled down somehow? You know, we're still 1 or 2 generations is nothing in the blip of time, you know? So there's a lot to talk about. And I think there's also a lot to talk about in terms of how do we who have grown up in a Western context re-examine the cultural signifiers that we identify as like Chinese, for instance. You know, like there are certain kind of cultural cliches that we toss around, the color red and gold, dragons, like, you know, like this is all, it's chinoiserie, right? It's, or at least for us growing up in the West, that stuff is used to kind of market our culture to white people. But at the same time, it's still, it's a flattening of it, but at the same time, it's still incredibly rich stuff that still has like extreme, it's still an indelible part of what makes Chineseness what it is. In the same way that like Corinthian columns and fleur-de-lis and other like Western symbols still permeate, you know, now to this day. Even like, wasn't Trump just like championing Corinthian columns and like wanted them, you know, like these are pillars of culture that go way back. And so I think we still have claim to those. It's just how do we use them in our work in a way that is still alive and in conversation with our heritage. anyway, that's a rambling answer, but
No, I completely understand. And having seen your work, especially, the exhibition you did at Milk, I forget what it was called. I think you worked with Lorna Cruz on it as well. I love that how you can use those cues, but kind of push it forward a little bit in the conversation. But yeah, I guess I wasn't able to really being kind of queerness and kind of Asian identity. I wasn't really able to kind of come to be more comfortable with that until I found a community in New York. And because growing up, we always saw Asian women as being quite fetishized and overly sexualized in media, and Asian men as subservient or never in leadership roles, or queer or non-binary Asian characters were kind of non-existent in general. So I'm just curious to see how do we dispel these misconceptions, and is this something that you look to address in your work in the past or moving forward?
Dispelling misconceptions about queerness among Asian Americans?
Yeah, and kind of like the way that Asians have been portrayed in media and films in the past in general. Like I never saw myself reflected in anything ever. I always kind of took cues from people like Patsy from Ab Fab, or it was never it wasn't until I found a community in New York that I saw myself reflected in real life. If that makes sense. So I'm just curious if you had a similar experience and how you kind of if you have used that in your work in any way.
Yeah, that's a good question. I had an interesting experience. Well, because I made this film called Kiss of the Rabbit God that released last year, and I had set out to make. Well, it came to me because Nowness had asked me to make a film about sex. They were going to do a series called Define Sex, because the previous year they did a series called Define Beauty. And I still had this very again, I grew up in a very Christian environment, so I was very I don't know if I can make a film about sex that's scary and naughty, and I don't know, But I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. So, and I wanted to make a film that was personal and that I could really, it was hard. It was hard to make that film. And I think these questions about representation became really magnified, especially during the casting process.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many talented queer Asian men out there. I had the pleasure of just auditioning so many talented, gay Asian cis men. Or I assume some of them were trans or non-binary, but it was interesting to see that the really American, even I want to say the Americanized ones, but also first gen who had just immigrated, the spectrum of masculinities and femininities that each one brought, and trying to figure out what was right for this story. And also trying to figure out how much of those masculinities and those femininities were performed in a off camera, outside of the audition. I could see, again, I think it begged this question of how do I put this? Asian men in general have been hyposexualized. And so many Asian American men have compensated by bulking up or performing hypermasculinity to compensate for it. And so when I'm asked, the character I'm doing was portraying was 18th century Chinese queer deity, and I wanted there to be a feminine, or at least I think feminine is even maybe too limiting of a word. I wanted there to be a queerness that was beyond. It was beyond masculine and feminine. I wanted there to be something elevated, and it was hard to find just the right temperature of gender embodiment, and because I think for many Asian men to approach femininity is scary, because that, like, the emasculation that we have faced has been weaponized against us.
Mm-hmm.
So how can you? But then, in a way, there's different levels of just inherited misogyny that we have to shed in order to really embody, like, this, that I felt I had to shed in order to find this character, and in order to find the actor who could play this character. So it's hard to even put it into words, but, like, that was an instance in which I had to navigate, like, who is this character I'm putting on screen, and I'm not trying to universalize. Like, this is my particular interpretation of this character. This is the deity that has existed in other texts, and other people have their right to interpret that deity, and there probably is a feminine, or queer, or there's probably just different interpretations of this character that I think other people could and should take a stab at. But I think in order to personalize it, that is the temperature that I chose for that. But I think it did call into question these stereotypes and representational violences that Asians have faced. That became a question when I was doing the casting process.
No, that makes complete sense, and I mean, I can relate to that so much, because it's not even about playing, playing roles in kind of, like, films or videos. It's also putting on a role yourself in real life as well. I mean, like, even just kind of looking for love or sex or whatever. I know so many of my Asian queer friends are having to put on a mask or like pretend to embody this very hyper masculine, like as you said, to kind of make up for being kind of like not even years, but so much emasculation over such a long time. But
right. And then again, and there's that, but I also have queer Asian friends who really soak in each other's femininity in this most gorgeous way, and so you have the opposite as well. So I don't want to summarize what I'm observing, but I am responding to a pattern of a behavior that is prevalent, especially for Asians in the West.
Of course. And for the friends that you mentioned, like, I'm also, those people I think are the ones that inspire me the most, because they're kind of unapologetic about who they want to be and who they are, and not subscribing to these stereotypes that have been inflicted upon us. So like I said, like, that, like, community empowerment has been so important to me, and that's in New York. I'm just seeing if there's a similar kind of community that you found in LA or New York or wherever you choose to kind of, like,
I think after making that film, I was very, like, blessed to encounter a whole queer Asian community here in LA that I didn't have access to before. Purely based on a few screenings of the film, which brought everyone out of the woodwork. There's also a few existing organizations, like one here called Space Makers, and then my friend started a community called Q&A for Queer and Asian, and they have worked with Bubble Tea to throw events. So it's like we had a moment in the past year, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
And so we had a Zoom event, and my friends are still active, plotting and scheming. I'm really proud of everyone. But it sucks that we had this momentum right before we all kind of had to become antisocial.
Yeah.
But it's there, and I think it's especially there on the internet, So, yeah. I have been lucky to find more expanded family recently.
And going from that, tell us a little bit about Eternal Dragonz, which is one of Community Bread's collectives. How did you get involved, and tell us a little bit about the projects that you've worked on with them.
Yeah, I first got in touch with them through Jason Wong and Jenny Yu, some of the original founders, and then I met Justin through them, and we did our first collab with, it was like, I made a video art piece. I made a video art piece. Oh, you know what happened? Trump was elected, And we were all just in such a bad mood. I think we're all so shocked, and I had to reflect, you know, his anti-immigrant rhetoric was so loud and so racist. And it was Chinese New Year. It was the year of the fire rooster. And I went to go check on my grandmother, and I hung out with her and her siblings. She immigrated here with, alone, but then eventually brought over her siblings, and they play mahjong. And I just was looking at their hands, like, what do you call it, shuffling the mahjong blocks. And so I videoed it. And I thought it was really beautiful to see their hands. And there was also a Guanyin statue at our restaurant that I always thought about as the protector of the restaurant. And thinking about, reflecting on my family's immigration history, to think that our well-being, or we were spared. My in particular, my family, I have relatives that were not spared the Cultural Revolution, but, you know, because my grandmother came here first, we were protected. And there's this idea of I don't know, I just felt maybe incredibly grateful, and this idea that of guardianship, or of like, I don't know, like hearkening back to a deity that has been relied upon by so many Chinese families to bring good luck and like good fortune to them and ensure their welfare. And I just think I had this moment of like gratitude that I'm here and that happened. And even though, despite feeling displaced here, I just felt overwhelmingly proud and grateful. And so I tried to make that piece as a tribute to them, and then we paired it with organ tapes, who Eternal Dragonz had been working with. So that was our first collaboration.
Nice. And then I wanted to ask you, because about obviously one of my favorite music videos of all time is Cellophane, which you directed. What was it like working with FK Twigs and on that music video in particular?
I mean, Twigs she's, you know, one of the greatest artists of our lifetime. I think she really is a singular voice. I feel like when she, I mean, you know, in 2012, 2013, when she first came out, like, I feel like the ground shook. And I think that she still has that power, and she's such an incredible performer. And so I really just feel grateful that it was a marriage of our talents, and she's just a generous collaborator. And I really felt like we saw eye to eye. I felt like it was just a really great collab where we could almost kind of finish it. Like she would say something and I'd be like, totally, you know, and vice versa. And so it was just a really great match. I feel really grateful that it happened. Sometimes things just converge really nicely.
Oh, nice. Is there any upcoming projects that you are planning or kind of in pre-production or working on at the moment?
Yeah, my first feature film is called Tiger Girl. It's still in late development. However, we have shot some tests. So any images you see out there are test footage.
Okay.
I've done the Sundance labs. I've done Film Independent labs. So I've had the honor of just being able to get this support and development help. And I would like to shoot it as soon as we can convene, as soon as the pandemic is over, which we don't know, but you know, I'm using this time to just continually develop it and make it better.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen a few visuals of imagery for Tiger Girl. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's about?
Yeah, it's about a young Chinese American girl in the 1960s who discovers a tiger lurking in her attic. And when she can't conform to her mother's ideals, she has to learn that the tiger is the thing that will set her free. So it's a coming-of-age fantasy. I've shot 2 tests. One that is public called Lily Chan and the Doom Girls. It's a standalone short, but it features the same characters in the movie, and it is a scene extracted from the movie. I did shoot another test that I'm keeping private for financing reasons. I hope to be able to share everything with everyone soon, but I think with social media, you know, I try and use this stuff to kind of put it out there in the world and show people like, look, this is what I'm thinking. This is what's possible. And so that when my film does come out, you know, there's a conversation of the thread of work, you know. Because like films take forever. They take, you know, to do an indie film takes a minimum of 5 years. I've already been writing it for 2, and I've had the idea for 10 years.
Wow.
So it's a different level of stamina. You know, I'm still doing music videos and stuff, but that, you know, that world moves so quickly. And I want to make something that's going to last. At least last for as long as our species will be on it, which is not very long. But, you know, I want to make a movie soon. So we'll see.
Oh, well, we can't wait to watch it. It sounds so exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us, and take good care, and I'll speak to you really soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.